Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mused by Mariah, the podcast. I'm super excited for this episode because it's a topic that I have been dying to get into. And I have relationship and intimacy coach and Reiki healer Shelby here, who we are going to kind of get into twin flames. And when I was talking to Shelby about this, I am like a full believer in twin flames and soulmates. And she was like, I don't think so. So we're here to debunk it and get her POV on what she thinks of what twin flames and soulmates are in our current lifetimes and how they can kind of, well, from her angle, how they adapt and shape us and why we should maybe kind of look at it from a different angle. So Shelby, thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too. I really, really like combining these topics together because the way that I really work is working with spirituality and science. And I've just found there's a lot of overlap with how spirituality describes things and then
Mm-hmm.
the science side. I'm like, oh, if you actually look at both of them, they fit really well together. And this explains that. And I think I really like that. I think it's super cool. So I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, so for my website, we're combining like two kind of different, but like you said, similar topics into one. So I'm excited to like really dive into that. But before we get into like the chunk of the episode and really debunking twin flames and soulmates, if you can just tell not only myself, but the listeners as well, how you kind of got into this line of work and what your title really represents and how you go about this work.
Okay, so how I got into this. So I feel like this work, any of this work, it started by something that's very painful, which is what happened with me. So something happened with my family where it was basically like I thought they were breaking up. And I felt like crap a lot of the time. And I was kind of like, I need to feel better. I need to feel better. I don't really know how I'm going to do that. It started with um, affirmations and then a
Mm-hmm.
little meditation. And then one of my girlfriends started to do, or she had her Reiki levels, and she's like, "Can I practice this on you?" I'm like, "Okay, sure." I
Mm-hmm.
don't really remember what this is about, but I'm game. Like, you're my best friend, sure. And then I had a really, really cool experience, like something I had just never experienced before at all, with feeling the energy and like the messages that she was telling me that I hadn't actually told her any information yet about what was really going on. She knew something was going on, but not the details. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so I just found it wildly interesting as for what was kind of going on there. And then it put me on a similar path of being like, I want to take this more spiritual path and learn about Reiki and healing and energy. And then I started doing the like more personal growth side, which was still spiritual, but then I moved a little bit more into the scientific and learning about attachment styles, which really seemed to um, fill in the blanks that the spirituality side of personal growth wasn't completing for me. So I was
Interesting.
there. And then what was the second part of your question? What what do I do? Kind of.
Yeah, how you kind of use this for clients and like how do you even begin with let's say someone who's completely new and tuning in for the first time and they're like they don't even know what these terms are.
Okay. So I would say it depends on where they're coming from, but like we'll go, I guess, more on a spiritual, if they're more on the spiritual realm first. So I would go with helping people understand what their intuitive voice versus what their ego voice is.
Mhm.
And then just like, to me, this is where science and spirit come in already in the overlap. The intuitive voice to me is when the nervous system says that your body is safe, and
Right.
we're really to truly feel what our inner voice is telling us, what's right for us, what's best for us. Our ego is more of when our nervous system is in that protection, safety, fight or flight mode. What is it that I need to do to defend and protect myself? And that can be like these really loud, obnoxious stories. This can be anxiety. It
Mhm.
can be, again, you're like pushing people away.
Right.
And those things can start to happen. And yeah, so it's like being able to discern which one's which, and then starting to understand what's happening in your body on a nervous system level to then be able to learn how to regulate and then be able to really hear your intuitive voice and balance yourself out, emotionally regulate.
And for people who also have no idea what Reiki is, can you just give like a quick brief description? I'm not sure if you use the chakras too. in
Yeah.
your work, or if someone who has no idea, if you can just give like a little background on what that is.
Yeah, so Reiki is energy healing. I do work with the chakras. We have 7 in our body, and each one represents something different. So depending on where that energetic blockage is, it's usually related to something emotional that's happening in your life that you've
Mhm.
decided to set down, and then it gets stored in whichever chakra that is. So like if something's going on and you've decided to hold your tongue and not speak up, then you're probably going to have an issue in your throat. If you don't feel safe, then it's going to be like an issue in your hips or your low back, because the base chakra, the root chakra, is about safety and basic needs.
Mhm.
Um, like what Reiki looks like, I guess, is it's just a universal energy that I am the conduit of, and then I send to my clients. And I'm doing online now. In person's great, but online I find is really, really great too.
Yeah.
So I guess just so people know that it is possible to do like energy. It's kind of like we are cell phones in a
Right.
sense.
Right.
It's cell phone towers. So I'm sending energy, and we'll still be able to receive that type of Reiki healing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Now, I would love to hear what your definition is of twin flames and soulmates.
Okay. All right. I've got like a whole write up here. I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
um I will say that my introduction to twin flames wasn't super healthy. So this is kind of like where I come from, where I was like, my experience of this was not, it didn't feel right to me.
Mhm.
And as I learned more, I was kind of like, I think that twin flames is explained by this particular attachment thing. But so for me, twin flame it's this dynamic of a runner and a chaser, which I
Mhm.
think is very commonly discussed in the spiritual realm of things. It can be more chaotic. I've heard a podcast, which I was like, I really did not like listening to. But it was the story of, um, someone who was really, really talking about your twin flames. And it does not matter what obstacle is in the way, you are meant to be with that person.
Right.
Like, wife doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, go after them anyway. And
Ew.
yeah. And it's like, that's kind of stuff that I kind of, maybe I didn't hear it right at the beginning, but I had heard some stuff like that. I'm like, that's no,
Right.
that makes sense to me. I don't think that that's what our soulmates are actually about.
Mhm.
So with this runner chaser dynamic, I find that this is very much like your anxious attachment style and
Mhm.
the avoidant attachment style. So the anxious would be the one that is chasing. The avoidant is like, you're being way too needy,
Mhm.
put away, walking away, give me space, runner chaser dynamic. But basically, it's a healing. It technically is a relationship which is showing you your patterns, your attachment styles, in which you can have the opportunity to heal them. Maybe with
Okay.
one, maybe not. But the twin flame is actually like this more chaotic relationship where you're not actually in a healthy space yet.
Okay.
That's my view of it. I just think it's a very kind of like, um, it's a dysregulated type of soulmate, which we can all end up going through that. But I think that there are different levels of soulmate, and the twin flame
Right.
is at the lowest level. There are higher levels.
Oh. Okay. Are there names for those other levels?
There was a book that I read that had about 7 different levels, and
Okay.
I have a YouTube video on it actually. But I kind of have some different options here of what of what I think these different levels are. But I just want to finish on, see if I have any other
Yeah.
twin flames I wanted to say. The twin flames I find can also have a very like dysregulating effect on your nervous system.
Okay.
If you're in that runner chaser, anxious avoidant dynamic, you're
Mhm.
going to be regulated all the time. You're not going to know how to emotionally regulate yourself or with your partner. And that's work that needs to be done on yourself. Like that's not something your partner is going to be able to
Right.
necessarily. So, depending on the situation, if you're both ready to do the work, then your twin flame could potentially turn into that truer soulmate that could be really good for you. But if you're not, a lot of the times I find it's people are just, I think it's kind of like they're more at the beginning of the journey when they meet their twin flames.
Mhm.
Neither one of you know how to deal with what's coming up yet. So
Right.
it's really the most ideal situation. It's I think it's usually often better to say like, hey, I'm going to take a break from dating for a little while and I'm going to work on myself and my patterns, because
Right.
I don't want to be a chaser. I just would like to be accepted
Right.
and loved,
Mm-hmm.
and do this in a really healthy, regulated way. So, um, yeah, that's my thoughts on the twin flame.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so with the soulmate, I really think that there are lots of different types of soulmates. Um, I think there's karmic soulmates, where with them, I believe that those are people that you've had relationships in past lives. Like if you believe in,
Mm. Yes. Yep.
where there's this like unfinished business, and it can
Mm-hmm.
be really good, really positive, or it can be something quite bad happened in that past life and it's meant to balance out in this life. Which I've had a couple. I feel like I've had a couple of those, and then I've also had someone that I know I've had past lives with who I have felt consistently safe with
Okay.
and really with. So there can be different types of experiences like that, and
Mm-hmm.
they can go out, and they're meant to teach you something, and then that's it, and then that's the time frame that they're meant to be in your life for, and then you go on to finding um, a truer soulmate, a longer, like someone that's meant to be in your life more permanently, or
Right.
the next lesson or something. Um, but your soulmates can also be people that are like your friends, your family, your coworkers, people that have similar soul missions to you, or again, just have lessons to offer you. And what else did I have here? I had okay, so some of the other stuff. So I do like relationship and intimacy coaching, and so I also really like to discuss things like sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to do like an interesting way of soulmates with this too. So um, if you're interested in the realms of kink and alternative relationships, you can have a kink relationship, which actually has nothing to do with sex, but these um, healing of the shadow side with another human.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a certain type of soulmate relationship, but there can literally be no sex, or there can be sex. It all depends. Um,
Interesting.
there can be soulmates. There can, like these different perspectives of, say, something like polyamory, where people
Mm-hmm.
believe there are all these people that they are meant to
Right.
love,
Yeah.
or love. They have this more expansive love, and then there's people that believe in like their one true soulmate. And like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's just that one. And all of those are very valid. Those are all options, and depending on what your how your life is set out. I guess when you come down from the cosmos, you
Mm-hmm.
have the option to do any of those options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's it for that one. Karmic soul.
Yeah. I I wanted to touch on this topic because I was in a relationship for, it was like on and off for like 3 years.
Mhm.
And I always felt this was like before I really started my spiritual journey. It was very toxic, but I
Yeah.
felt a weird connection to him, like a soul connection. And this was
Mhm.
before I tapped into any of my spiritual side. And it's funny, I remember like there was a few coincidences that occurred during a relationship that I was just like, that is like weird. Like that is weird that it happened. And I remember one of the coincidences was he showed me a picture from his middle school graduation. And I thought he was sending it to me because my mom was in the background. And I was like, why are you sending this to me? He was like, oh, I just wanted to show you, like, I just came across this photo and like, I want to show you what I looked like in middle school. And I was like,
Mhm.
my mom is in the background of that picture. Like, I
Oh,
thought that's why you're sending it to me. And he was like, oh my God, I didn't even notice your mom. He knew my mom. But I was like, that is freaking weird. And then we broke up and I met with a psychic medium
Mhm.
and she's awesome, but she got like the whole relationship down to a T, down to his name, down to like the amount of time we were together, like crazy. And then she was
Mhm.
like, this is one of your soulmates in this lifetime. And I was
Mhm.
like, ooh, I was like, I feel that, but it's like crazy hearing you say it. And then I
Mhm.
remember, I think maybe it was a year after that, I met with a different psychic. I go to psychic mediums like once a year. Like that's my therapy session. I'm like, oh, let me get like the gist of my life for the year. So I met
Mhm.
with another one. She said the same thing. She was like, this is one of your soulmates in your lifetime. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is crazy. Like so crazy. So I feel like to this day, I still consider him one of my soulmates that I've met in this
Mhm.
lifetime. So do you agree, or do you have a different opinion on if everyone has at least one soulmate that we have during this lifetime, and do we meet them? Like, I know there's some people who feel like they've never met their soulmate throughout their whole entire lives, but what is your view on that?
I Yeah, again, I think that we have like so many of the people in our lives are our soulmates in different, in just on different levels and intensities, basically. So I'd say like yes, definitely. Um, I think on the like the queen princess romance side of things, um, that soulmate, I don't know. I think it depends because I really think that there's people who again have like met in past lives and they're meant to come back to each other. Their karma wasn't completed, like they were
Mhm.
meant lovers and then they were like taken away from each other too soon because of whatever factors, and then they're meant to like meet up and finish their beautiful relationship in this lifetime or whatever.
Mhm.
um so I definitely think that we are meant to meet those really important people, but I also again think that there can be like, as we're learning and as we're growing, we could have that like a really beautiful romantic soulmate. So people that get married and then divorced and then married again, both people that they were married to could be soulmates, and
Right.
then some people grow with them, some people don't, and
Mhm.
just up to that point that they were meant to be your soulmate for this like period of time, and then after that it's like, well, if like unless you're going to grow with me, then I think our relationship is done, because like what,
Right.
I don't want to say stagnant anymore.
Mhm.
So and then you go into the next one, but then if it's a relationship where um, there's consistent growth and there's consistent learning, and you guys are both still like going in same directions and have similar values, then you stay together.
Mhm.
Kind of how like I think that's just how in general relationships work. But
Right.
yeah, certain soulmates are meant to. Yeah, I don't
Be
know.
a part of certain times during our lives, and then
Yeah,
vice versa in others. Now, in
yeah.
terms of romantic relationship soulmates or twin flames, how do you, before we get into the, I know you talk about blending spirit and science, and we're going to get into the attachment styles, but how do you feel these romantic soulmates have an effect on our lives? And I think like what we just talked about is really important for people to understand, that a lot of these people who come into our lives are serving the purpose that they're meant to during that season. And
Mhm,
when we transition into the next season, it's okay if they leave, because they came here to serve their purpose, and now their purpose is done. Whether
mhm.
that's for a year, whether that's for 20 years, or whether we remain with them for the rest of our lives. But how do you feel like these romantic relationship twin flames or soulmates have an effect on not only us personally, but on our spiritual growth as well? I know it's a hefty question.
Well, I don't. I answer other than how I kind of already have, to be honest. Like I just think that each person helps us to grow and learn how to either get out of our patterns or to speak up for ourselves about certain things so that we can eventually have a better love or
Mhm.
own that love that we truly want. So I think we have these romantic partners where we fall in love with them, but they're really not super great for us. Um,
Right.
we learn I needed this. They didn't give me that. They didn't want to give me that. They weren't
Mhm.
capable of that. And then the next person that comes along, or maybe you have to repeat the pattern a few times, then you learn what how you're supposed to be treated and
Right.
what the baseline really should be. Like I was accepting way less, and that was like way under what the baseline actually is supposed to be.
Mhm.
Yes, like that. That is,
Mhm.
turns out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a strong believer in the universe will keep giving you the same scenario until you understand the lesson.
Well, it will, because and again, this is going back to the blending of the science part. Like our nervous systems and our attachment style, the way that we've grown up and we've um, look at people and understand people, our nervous system is like basically trained to
Right.
have this as a normal situation. So if your normal is a more chaotic situation, or always like chasing someone to get love, or always pushing someone away because it just seems too overstimulating for you,
Mhm.
then that's going to be what you consistently attract until
Mm-hmm.
you become the person that is the pattern. Like you do something that causes a pattern in
Right.
your life, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know we briefly touched on it, but you talk a lot about blending the spirit and science. And I know you brought up anxious and avoidant attachments. Do
Mm-hmm.
you also work with like secure attachments? And I know the fourth one, I'm blanking right now. Uh, if you can just briefly go over each attachment style and then talk about how that affects our relationships, either on a romantic level or with friends and family as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll start with secure. Like secure is just very balanced,
Mm-hmm.
very emotionally regulated. Will be able to usually clearly communicate. They'll be able to express their needs in a really healthy way. They won't necessarily have stories about things. They'll just ask for clarity if something comes up and they don't understand it. They'll be really good with their boundaries. They'll be really good with their time. They're not likely to people please. Um, they're just really, really solid communicators. And you'll feel in your body, you will feel very regulated. You won't feel anxious. You won't feel anxious.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you have an anxious attachment style, they feel very grabby, is how that,
Yep.
it's very,
Guilty.
very,
Guilty.
um, I find it's like they need a lot of reassurance. They need a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people want to know that you're not going to leave them, basically. They are likely to have had some sort of like abandonment wounds or I'm not lovable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they really just want that connection, but they will, in order to keep them safe and to feel loved, like especially if it came from when they were a child, it doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
necessarily come from childhood. It can come from later experiences. But if it's coming from a child, then it's basically comes down to safety. Like my parent wasn't
Right.
there as often as I needed. I don't know when, like I want them. I want their attention. I don't feel loved because I'm not getting enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they do like grabby energy. They people please. They do something like super cute or funny so they can get the attention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they require to feel safe and loved and
Right.
connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then that turns into similar kind of slightly more grown up patterns, but sometimes you can see it as for what it is and be like, why are they acting like a child
Right.
in an adult body, right? So it's really interesting. Um, the dismissive avoidant is kind of what it sounds like. Dismissive, they want to push people away because they would have tried to create these like bids for attention and affection, and they just kept getting shut down. Or their parents would give them like very basic needs so they could survive, meaning they got the food, they got the shelter, but they didn't necessarily get that emotional connection or that
Mm-hmm.
they really, really needed. Um, their parents could have been like, not emotionally there. There could be something else like that happening. So it ended up being safer for them to learn how to emotionally regulate and go into their own worlds. They may be people that have these patterns of self-soothing and going into these worlds of like games or books or what else they do. It, mostly like not mostly, but things like that. They can just get very, very focused on certain
Mm-hmm.
things, their world in which they can create that connection. Um, and they can be very anxious too. They might not show it. They'll be very stoic about it, but inside there will be
Yeah.
anxiety. They're just going to be like, I can't show that to you because that's way too vulnerable.
Yeah.
And no one's shown me that I can trust you with my vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to like suffer in silence over here. And then the fearful avoidant is actually what I recovered from. So I'm like an earned secure now. And fearful avoidant is both, both anxious and avoidant. And basically it's like this pendulum that goes back and forth
Mm-hmm.
between I want connection. And if I feel there's a disconnection, I'll start to do this grabby energy, then I'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get scared because there's a lot of vulnerability. So then I'll
Go back.
face.
Mm-hmm.
Really confusing for people who are dealing with it if they don't know what's going on. Like, you want, I don't get it. You want this connection. Now you're pulling away and
Right.
it's like flip flopping back and forth. You're not very, it's very inconsistent. So it can be really, really confusing. And I find the fearful avoidance can also be very volatile with
Mm-hmm.
their with their emotions. So anger can come up a lot quicker with them. Resentment can be something that's very common with them. And the way that they set boundaries is my boundary's been pushed way too far. Hard boundary, you are like out of my life, or whatever the situation is, and it comes from anger. It doesn't come from a regulated place.
Right. So when I know, obviously, all we probably want to strive to a secure attachment style. And I notice that I have an anxious attachment and it stems back to my childhood. And
Mm-hmm.
I've worked through it, I should say working through it, because I'm definitely not. There's some triggers that I still come up, but I recognize them. But how does this affect our relationships? And if we do have a twin flame and soulmate and it's kind of like contradicting attachment styles, how do we work through that?
Well, when we get into those relationships, they're calling us to equilibrate what it is that we need.
Mhm.
So if you're more anxious, when they pull away, when the avoidant pulls away, it's calling you to learn how to emotionally regulate
Right.
yourself, right? And with the avoidant, it's calling to connect instead of being like, no, push away. I need to just be by myself. Now,
Mhm.
and rely on people to help emotionally regulate you, and that you can trust and be vulnerable. Like that's okay. So it's actually just calling you to do the work of balance, finding that balance that you truly need. So
Mhm.
again, as if both parties are willing, then it can actually be a really beautiful healing process. But if they're not, then you can do it on your own, and you don't have to be in a romantic relationship to do that healing work, because you'll notice
Mhm.
in all the relationships that are surrounding you, you will start to notice that your family members are a certain way,
Right.
and they're a certain way, and then the people at work are a certain way, and then you'll just be able to be like, oh, okay, I like, I can deem them as, this person's anxious, this person's more dismissive. How can I, and you just start to do the work on yourself here and be like, I recognize this, and I need to do X, Y, Z
Right.
in order to balance.
It's interesting that you say that because I have been doing the work, but I find it to be a lot easier to put this into practice with like family who are like treating me like shit, or friends who are not being good friends,
Mhm.
coworkers. It's like, yeah, whatever. But when it comes to that romantic relationship and I'm triggered, it's like a totally different side of me. And that's something that I'm working through. And I'm struggling with. Like, I feel like I'm definitely a lot better than I was, but there's times where I'm just like, boop, I go right back into the, like, the pure anxious attachment style. And I find
Mhm.
it so much more difficult when trying to reflect when doing it with a romantic partner instead of literally anybody else.
Mhm. Well, I think with the romantic partner, I think there's so much that we want from them, versus I think with like everyone else, it's kind of like, well, we know our family, it's an established relationship already.
Right.
They're probably not going anywhere, and we're just going to work on the relationship as we can. Friends, we can, again, like, we don't have as much attachment with. Coworkers, we don't have as much attachment with. It's just like the romantic partner is like the epitome of
Yeah.
all people that we really truly want to select to be with. So I think that's why it's that much harder, because there's more. It feels like there's more at stake. It feels like there's more fear involved.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but I think like the best. I don't know. Like, are you dating, or are you with someone now?
No, I was dating like a month ago and now I'm like, you know what? I'm over it. Like I was like immediate red flags and n- kind of communicated. I was like, I don't appreciate this that you're doing. And I might have came off a little bit more aggressive than I just said it, but I noticed it right away. And the person that I was communicating with, I just don't think they were capable of getting that receptive feedback, like, in the
Mhm.
time period that we were dating.
Mhm.
But so now I'm just riding solo.
Yeah. Well, no, but that's like I find that that's good in the sense of being not being with anyone right now. It's a lot harder to start to change things when you're already in a relationship.
Right.
So
Mhm.
it you can start off in like when you start to do dating again, you can filter people out a lot better. So I don't know, like one thing, if you're more anxious, then maybe you experience this with more like communication style
Yes.
with this.
Yes. Hmm.
So there would be like long periods of time where dismissive avoidant won't message you back.
Right.
So for example, I have a limit. I'm like, if you're not able to get back to me within 24 hours, like I just don't bother.
Right.
I think it's worth it. Um, which I've also realized that on dating apps, they can be really overwhelming. They
Hmm.
can be hard, to be honest. So sometimes it's just like, once you actually get to go on a date and exchange numbers, then it might be you can implement that rule. But on dating apps, maybe it's a little bit harder. But it's
Yeah.
what what do you want to allow in what circumstances? So dating apps maybe have like, 3 days,
Right.
3 day rule of being able to, like, I want to chat a little bit, have a conversation, let's set something up, try to get that going, and then notice the patterns of how quickly they get back to you. Like, to me, those are
Yeah.
something they'll see right away. So if it's a dismissive person, they're not going to get back to you very quickly. You can speak up for your need and say, hey, like, I really need people to get back to me within 24 hours. I think that that's quite reasonable.
Right.
Um, like, period. You can just express your need, and then you
Yeah.
can. There's nothing, you're not that involved at that point.
Right.
And they
Right.
can't.
That was my issue, is trying to tell myself like it's nothing serious, but I was getting so triggered. My issue was, I don't care if you take hours and hours to answer. But my
Mhm.
issue was that I noticed him on social media, posting on social media, doing all this and wouldn't answer me for hours. I'm like, just tell me you're not interested. Like, don't waste my time at this point. Because now I feel like it's a slap in my face when
Mhm.
I see you blatantly ignoring me. And then he just came up with all these excuses. And I was just like, I just don't have time for it. I was like, if you want to take me out, you can let me know. And that was literally my last text. And he never let me know. So I was taking that as a no go. But it's just
Yeah,
like dealing with grown men who should be able to communicate. Like, I'd rather you just tell me you're not interested than playing all these like side shuffle games that I don't have time for.
yeah, I agree with that. But in with what you're saying too, there it does sound like there are a little bit of stories happening. Because no, he wasn't, like, it doesn't help when people don't communicate with you, because it allows all this space for you to say, why isn't he
Yeah.
communicating?
Right.
Maybe this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this other thing, and then the anxious mind just goes, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, it's all these things. So you don't know exactly what it was that was truly going on,
Right.
but at the end of the day, he wasn't communicating in a way that worked for you. And
Right.
so you just say, okay, nope, not right now. We're gonna try again.
Done.
And like,
Adios.
yeah, and that's okay. So and some of it again is just like trying to communicate a little bit more and saying, this is how I'm feeling. I just want to know whether or not, like, these are the stories I'm telling myself. Is this right? Is this wrong? Can you just,
Right.
like, let me know? And then some people will receive that really well, or some people will be like, the fuck, you're
Yeah.
crazy.
Fuck
Oh,
you,
okay,
psycho.
yeah. Do you want someone that's going to respond to you like that? And no, you also don't
Right.
want that feeling, right? So it's actually
Right.
can be very how people respond. You're like, I don't want to be treated like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this. And I would love if, before we get to like the wrap up, if you can provide like one major takeaway for listeners, either from our first part about twin flames or soulmates, or about blending spirit and science with their attachment styles, or both. Because I feel like we touched on a lot of different topics, and if there's one major takeaway that not only myself but listeners can take away from the episode.
You don't have to be stuck in your pattern. You can 100% heal it. You can heal your attachment style. And you can find that soulmate that you truly desire once you are able to break those patterns. It's possible.
Hmm.
Mm.
Period. And I'm going to go as soon as we're done. I'm going to do some journaling, and I need to do some reflection. I already did my Sunday morning reset. Now I need to do my midday. And thank you so much again, Shelby, for coming on and sharing your insight. Like I said, I was like dying to talk about this topic for so long, but I felt like I wanted to have someone who was more experienced in it and
Mhm.
knowledgeable, because there is only so much I can learn from Google. Um, so thank you again for coming on. And for anyone who's listening, if you want to just drop your handles, website, any information that you want for listeners to find you. And if you don't hear it on here, I'll include it in the show notes too, so you can check it out there.
Mhm. And then if I can, I do have a couple links. Um,
Yeah.
So if you're interested in learning some more about like the different types of soulmates that I kind of did a review on, it was a few years ago. I do have my YouTube channel, so I can send it to you and
Mm-hmm.
get a direct link to that. And then
Definitely.
also on my website again, so I do a lot of like intimacy coaching specifically. So it's intimacy with self so that you can find your soulmate basically. I have it's an intimacy yes, no, maybe list. And so this is for understanding emotional intimacy, but also sexual intimacy that you can just check off for yourself or be able to give to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have like I have free calls for anyone that's interested in learning how to create that deeper intimacy with self so that they can find their very healthy
relationship. Mm-hmm.
soulmate.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. And if you don't follow me yet, make sure you follow me at Muse by Mariah _ on Instagram. I have a Facebook group for this podcast. I'm also posting on YouTube, TikTok. I'm all around. So be sure to find me. And thank you again, Shelby, for coming on and talking about this. For all the listeners, you'll catch me in 2 weeks. So thank you for tuning in. Bye.